1. Let me tell you about this absolute gem I just stumbled upon. A 1971 Ford Maverick that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $15,000. This beauty is rocking a clean title and comes in a slick green paint job that'll turn heads wherever you go. Under the hood, you've got a beastly 5.0 302 V8 engine that's been scoped and tuned to perfection. It's paired with a 3-speed automatic transmission with a B&M shifter, so you know this baby's got some serious get up and go. The seller's gone all out with upgrades, folks. We're talking a grabber grille with fog lights, a Dynacorn grabber hood with dual scoops, and a 9 rear end. The suspension's been completely overhauled with top-notch parts from OpenTracker, KYB, and Moog. It's like riding on a cloud, I tell you. Inside, it's just as impressive. The seats are in fantastic condition, and you've got a new radio, speakers, carpet, headliner, and even deluxe door panels imported from Brazil. Talk about attention to detail. Now, I gotta be real with you. The seller says this Maverick is in excellent condition, and from what I can see, they're not exaggerating. The paperwork's up to date, it runs great, and they've clearly put a lot of love and care into this classic. At $15,000 or best offer, this seems like a steal for a well-maintained, upgraded piece of American muscle car history. They're even open to trades if you've got something interesting to offer. If you're in the market for a head-turning classic that's ready to hit the road, this '71 Maverick might just be your ticket to ride. 2. We're checking out a real classic gem, a 1974 Pontiac Catalina that's up for grabs on Craigslist for $8,400. This beauty has been through some changes, and I've got to say, they're pretty impressive. The seller's given this Catalina a fresh coat of paint, transforming it from its original white. Now, I don't know about you, but there's something special about a newly painted classic. It just makes it pop. This Catalina's got some miles on it, 105,000 to be exact, but don't let that scare you off. These old American boats were built to last, and this one's still cruising strong. The seller's thrown on some newer tires and wheels, which is always a good sign. They've also added a Flowmaster exhaust, so you know this baby's got a nice rumble to it. Now here's the kicker. The seller claims there's no rust. For a car from '74, that's pretty remarkable if true. It suggests this Catalina's been well cared for over the years. The clean title is another plus, meaning you shouldn't have any paperwork headaches if you decide to make this beauty yours. Under the hood, we're looking at a gas engine, which is paired with an automatic transmission. That's typical for these old cruisers, perfect for smooth, comfortable rides. The seller doesn't mention any mechanical issues, but as always with classics, it's worth taking a closer look or getting a mechanic's opinion if you're serious about buying. Overall, this '74 Pontiac Catalina seems like a solid find for anyone looking to get into classic car ownership without breaking the bank. It's got some nice upgrades, appears to be in good condition, and has that unmistakable '70s style. Just remember, with any classic car, there's always potential for hidden issues, so make sure to give it a thorough inspection if you're considering making an offer. But if everything checks out, this could be your ticket to some serious vintage cruising. 3. We're taking a look at a real piece of American luxury, a 1972 Cadillac Eldorado that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $8,500. This brown beauty is a testament to the era of land yachts, and boy, does it have a story to tell. First off, let's talk about that mileage. Only 42,300 miles on the clock. That's incredibly low for a car of this vintage, which suggests it's been more of a garage queen than a daily driver. Under the hood, you've got the classic Cadillac V8 engine, paired with an automatic transmission. And here's a fun fact for you. This Eldorado is front-wheel drive, which was pretty innovative for its time. Now, I've got to be straight with you folks, this Caddy isn't perfect. The seller mentions a recent run-in with a malfunctioning car wash that left some damage on the hood and passenger quarter panel. That's a bit of a bummer, but hey, it adds character, right? On the bright side, the interior is reportedly in excellent shape, which is often the hardest part to maintain on these old Luxo barges. The chrome is all original and in great condition too, which is a big plus for collectors. The seller's also done some recent work, including a brand new top, new master cylinder, and fresh intake manifold gaskets. There are a few quirks to be aware of. The AC is described as hit or miss, so you might want to factor in some potential repairs there. But on the upside, it's got good tires and brakes, which are always important. Overall, this 72 Eldorado seems like a solid find for someone looking to get into classic Cadillac ownership. It's got its flaws, sure, but it also has a lot of potential. At $8,500, it could be a great project car or a comfortable cruiser with a bit of TLC. Remember, folks, with classics like these, you're not just buying a car, you're buying a piece of history. So if you're in the market for a taste of 70s luxury and don't mind a bit of a fixer-upper, this Eldorado might just be your ticket to ride. Just make sure to give Lee a call if you're serious. No texts or emails on this one. 4. We're diving into a real gem that's popped up on Craigslist, a 1972 Ford Thunderbird that's currently on the market for $10,500. Let me tell you, this isn't just any old T-Bird. This is a true survivor with only 59,000 original miles on the clock. Now, I've got to be honest with you folks. When I first saw this listing, I was a bit skeptical. It's not every day you come across a 50-year-old car in such pristine condition. But the more I look at the details, the more impressed I am. First off, let's talk about that vinyl top. The seller mentions it's nearly 100% intact, which is a testament to how well this car has been cared for. Vinyl tops are often the first things to go on these old beauties, so seeing one in good shape is a real treat. Under the hood, you've got the mighty 460 cubic inch V8 engine, which the seller says runs like an absolute top. That's music to any classic car lover's ears. Paired with an automatic transmission, this T-Bird is ready to cruise in style. One of the most impressive things about this Thunderbird is that all the electronics are fully functional. Anyone who's dealt with classic cars knows that electrical issues can be a nightmare, so having everything working is a huge plus. The car is nearly all original, with the seller noting that the only modification they've spotted is a non-original passenger mirror. That's pretty remarkable for a car of this age. Now, I always like to remind potential buyers that with any classic car, it's important to see it in person and maybe get a mechanic to look it over. Even well-preserved cars can have hidden issues. But overall, this 1972 Thunderbird seems like a fantastic find for any classic Ford enthusiast or someone looking to get into the classic car scene. At $10,500 OBO, it's priced competitively for its condition and mileage. And hey, they're even willing to negotiate delivery on a trailer for serious buyers. So if you're in the market for a piece of American automotive history that's been lovingly preserved, this 72 T-Bird might just be your ticket to ride. 5. We're taking a look at a real gem that's popped up on Craigslist, a 1979 Ford Thunderbird that's currently up for grabs at $9,500. Now, I've got to tell you, this isn't your average T-Bird, and here's why. First off, let's talk about those miles. This beauty has only 38,000 original miles on the clock. That's incredibly low for a car that's over 4 decades old. It's like this T-Bird has been in a time capsule, just waiting for the right owner to come along. Under the hood, you've got the classic 302 cubic inch V8 engine. That's Ford's tried and true power plant that's known for its reliability and smooth operation. Paired with an automatic transmission and rear-wheel drive, this Thunderbird is set up for some classic American cruising. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. The seller has done a ton of recent work on this car. We're talking a new gas tank, sending unit, fuel pump, carburetor, ignition module, coil, plugs, distributor cap, and rotor. Basically, the entire fuel and ignition system has been overhauled. That's a big deal, folks. It means this T-Bird is ready to hit the road without you having to worry about those common old car issues. They've also put new tires on it, which is always a plus. Nothing worse than buying a classic car and immediately having to shell out for new rubber. The seller describes the condition as excellent, and given the low mileage and recent work, I'm inclined to believe them. Of course, as with any classic car, it's always a good idea to see it in person and maybe get a mechanic to look it over if you're serious about buying. At $9,500, this 1979 Thunderbird seems like a solid deal. You're getting a low-mileage, well-maintained piece of American automotive history. It's not often you find a classic car that's both this original and this well-sorted. So if you're in the market for a classic Ford that stands out from the crowd, this 79 T-Bird might just be your ticket. It's got style, it's got presence, and with all the recent work, it's ready to cruise. 6. We're taking a look at a real gem that's popped up on Craigslist. A 1985 Cadillac Eldorado that's currently on the market for $6,500. Now let me tell you, this isn't your average 80s caddy, and here's why. First off, we're dealing with a one-owner car here, folks. That's right. This Eldorado has been with the same family since it rolled off the showroom floor. The current seller inherited it from their father, which adds a touch of sentimental value to this already special ride. Now, let's talk about those miles. This beauty has only 71,739 miles on the clock. For a car that's pushing 40 years old, that's incredibly low. It's like this Eldorado has been taking it easy all these years, just waiting for the right enthusiast to come along. Under the hood, you've got Cadillac's V8 engine, paired with an automatic transmission. And here's a fun fact for you. This Eldorado is front-wheel drive, which was pretty innovative for its time, especially for a luxury car. The seller mentions that the car runs excellently, which is always good to hear. They also note that it spent its life in Palmdale, California, which explains the condition of the paint. Now, they don't go into detail about the paint, but given the dry climate of Palmdale, it's likely that this caddy hasn't had to deal with the kind of rust issues that plague cars in wetter parts of the country. One thing to note, the seller says the car is currently non-opted as of 2022. I'm assuming they mean non-op or non-operational in terms of registration. This isn't necessarily a red flag, but it's something you'd want to ask about if you're interested in the car. At $6,500, this 1985 Eldorado seems like a solid deal for someone looking to get into classic Cadillac ownership. It's got low miles, a known history, and it's coming from a dry climate. Plus, it's got that unmistakable 80s Cadillac style that's starting to gain more appreciation among collectors. Remember, folks, with classics like these, you're not just buying a car, you're buying a piece of history. So if you're in the market for a taste of 80s luxury and don't mind making a phone call, no texts per the seller's request, this Eldorado might just be your ticket to ride. Just make sure to ask about that non-opted status and maybe get a mechanic to look it over if you're serious. 7. We're diving into a real slice of American luxury, a 1979 Cadillac Fleetwood Brougham that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $9,500. Let me tell you, this isn't just any old caddy, this is a time capsule on wheels. First off, let's talk about that mileage. At 97,769 miles, this Fleetwood has seen some action, but for a 40-plus-year-old car, that's not bad at all. The seller says it runs great and has a new battery, which is always good to hear. Now feast your eyes on that baby blue paint job. The seller claims it's nice and shiny, and the vinyl roof is in good shape with no cracks. That's a big deal for these old land yachts, as roof vinyl can often be a trouble spot. Inside, you're looking at a well-preserved leather interior and a dashboard that's holding up nicely. The headliner's in good condition too, which is another common issue with cars of this vintage. And get this, it's got the original 8-track player with an official Cadillac cassette, plus a CB radio. How's that for a blast from the past? Under the hood, you've got Cadillac's 495 cubic inch V8, pushing out 180 horsepower. It's paired with the bulletproof turbo-hydromatic 400 transmission, so you know this baby's set up for smooth cruising. Now, I've got to be straight with you folks. This caddy isn't perfect. The seller's been upfront about a few issues. The steering column's been cut into and has some play. There are a couple of scratches on the body, and there's a spot of dried tree sap on the roof vinyl. The front passenger power window control is also a bit wonky. But hey, that's all part of the character of a classic car, right? At $9,500, this 1979 Fleetwood Brougham seems like a solid deal for someone looking to get into classic Cadillac ownership. It's got its quirks, sure, but it also has a lot of charm and potential. Plus, with all those power features and that cushy interior, it's a great way to experience what luxury meant in the late 70s. So, If you're in the market for a piece of automotive history that'll turn heads and give you a smooth, comfortable ride, this '79 Fleetwood might just be your ticket. 8. We're taking a look at a real piece of American automotive history, a 1967 Plymouth Belvedere 2 that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $4,900. Now, I've got to be straight with you folks, this isn't a show car, but it's got potential written all over it. First off, we're dealing with a 4-door sedan here, which might not be as sought after as the sportier 2-door models, but it's got a charm all its own. Under the hood, you've got the trusty 225 cubic inch slant 6 engine paired with an automatic transmission. This isn't a tire-shredding muscle car, but these slant 6s are known for their reliability and longevity. The seller claims it's a really nice original with 108,000 miles on the clock, but they also mention the odometer has rolled over. So, we're likely looking at 208,000 miles or more. That's a lot of road under its wheels, but these old Plymouths were built to last. Now, here's where it gets real. This Belvedere has been sitting for a while. The seller admits it needs some TLC, which is usually code for "it needs work." They say it runs, which is a good start, but after sitting for an extended period, you're likely looking at replacing fluids, hoses, and maybe even rebuilding the carburetor. The body appears to be yellow, and the seller describes it as very complete. That's a big plus because finding original parts for these old Mopars can be a challenge. The clean title is another positive point. At $4,900, this 1967 Belvedere II could be a good project for someone looking to get into classic car restoration without breaking the bank. It's not going to be a quick flip. You'll need to put in some time and effort to get it roadworthy again. But if you're patient and handy with a wrench, this could be a rewarding project. Remember folks, cars like this are more than just transportation. They're a piece of history. Whether you're looking to restore it to its former glory or use it as a parts car for another project, this old Plymouth deserves a good home. So if you're in the market for a classic Mopar project and don't mind putting in some elbow grease, this '67 Belvedere might just be your ticket. 9. We're diving into a real gem that's popped up on Craigslist, a 1964 Ford Falcon Futura convertible that's currently on the market for $10,500. Let me tell you, this isn't your average classic Ford, and here's why. First off, we're talking about a convertible here, folks. There's nothing quite like cruising with the top down in a piece of '60s Americana. This Falcon Futura is rocking a blue paint job with what the seller describes as cool patina. That means it's got some character, which a lot of classic car lovers really appreciate. Under the hood, you've got the 200 cubic inch inline 6 engine. Now, it might not be the V8 that some folks crave, but these 6s are known for their reliability and smooth operation. The seller mentions it's been detailed with a chrome valve cover and air cleaner, so you know it's got some visual appeal when you pop the hood. It's mated to a 3-speed manual transmission, giving you that authentic '60s driving experience. One of the coolest features is the new Auto Sounds factory-style stereo with an amp and new speakers, so you can enjoy modern sound quality while maintaining that vintage look. The top is reportedly in great shape too, which is always a big concern with convertibles of this age. Now here's where it gets interesting. The odometer shows 10,000 miles. The seller doesn't mention if this is original or if it's rolled over, so that's something you'd want to clarify if you're serious about buying. The seller describes this Falcon as a great driver car, which suggests it's in good running condition. They're even open to trades, specifically mentioning a 1955 to 1956 Ford Thunderbird with cash on top. That shows they know their classic Fords. At $2,500 or best offer, this 1964 Falcon Futura convertible seems like a solid deal for someone looking to get into classic Ford ownership. It's got style, it's got charm, and it's ready for some summer cruising. Remember folks, with classics like these, it's always a good idea to see them in person and maybe get a mechanic to look it over. But if everything checks out, this could be your ticket to some serious vintage motoring fun. 10. We're diving into a real showstopper that's popped up on Craigslist, a 1969 Chevy Impala lowrider that's currently on the market for $15,000. Now let me tell you, this isn't your average '69 Impala, And here's why. First off, we're dealing with a fully decked out lowrider here, folks. The seller claims it's in very good condition, and from the description, it sounds like they've put a lot of work into making this Impala stand out from the crowd. Let's start with the undercarriage. We're talking chrome and gold engraving. That's not something you see every day, and it shows the level of detail that's gone into this build. The motor's been chromed out too, which is sure to turn heads when you pop the hood at car shows. Now, for the lowrider enthusiasts out there, this Impala is set up with 2 pumps and 6 batteries. That means you're ready to hit those switches and put on a show wherever you go. The interior is described as clean with no rips or tears, which is impressive for a car of this age. The seller mentions gold and chrome interior pieces, matching the exterior bumpers, which are also done up in gold and chrome. There's even a custom trunk setup and 2 antennas in the back for that classic lowrider look. Here's the kicker though. The seller says all it needs is paint. So while this Impala sounds like it's mechanically sorted and has a ton of custom work done, you'll need to factor in the cost of a paint job to really make it shine. The odometer shows 20,000 miles, but on a car like this, that's likely after a rebuild or restoration. It's got a clean title and an automatic transmission, making it easy to cruise. At $15,000 or best offer, this 1969 Impala lowrider could be a great deal for someone looking to get into the lowrider scene or add to their collection. The seller is also open to trades, so there's some flexibility there. Remember folks, with custom builds like this, it's always a good idea to see them in person and maybe get a lowrider specialist to look it over. But if everything checks out, this could be your ticket to turning heads at car shows and cruise nights. 11. We're taking a look at a real gem that's popped up on Craigslist, a 1974 Plymouth Duster that's currently up for grabs at $8,000. Now let me tell you, this isn't your average Duster, and here's why. First off, we're dealing with a gold Duster here, folks. That's a special trim level that Plymouth offered back in the day, and it's got some unique features that set it apart from the standard Duster. The seller describes it as gorgeous, which is always good to hear about a nearly 50-year-old car. Now, here's where it gets interesting. This is apparently a space edition with a folding back seat. That's not a term I'm familiar with for Dusters, but the folding seat is a cool feature that adds a lot of practicality. The seller says you can fit a sheet of plywood back there, which is pretty impressive for a compact coupe. Under the hood, you've got the legendary Slant 6 engine. But this isn't just any Slant 6. It's been hopped up with an Offenhauser 4-barrel intake manifold, a 500 CFM Edelbrock carburetor, and headers with a new exhaust system. That's a lot of go-fast goodies for a typically sedate engine, and it should make this Duster a lot more peppy than your average Slant 6 car. The odometer shows 75,000 miles, which isn't bad at all for a car of this vintage. The seller says it drives fantastic, which is always good to hear. It's got an automatic transmission, making it easy to cruise around town or on the highway. The paint is described as yellow, which could be the original Gold Duster color or a repaint. You'd want to check that out in person. The title is clean, which is always a plus with classic cars. At $8,000, this 1974 Duster seems like a solid deal for someone looking to get into classic Mopar ownership. It's got some nice upgrades, appears to be in excellent condition, and has that unmistakable 70s Mopar style. Remember folks, with classics like these, it's always a good idea to see them in person and maybe get a mechanic to look it over. But if everything checks out, this could be your ticket to some serious vintage Mopar fun. 12. We're diving into a real gem that's popped up on Craigslist, a 1978 Ford LTD that's currently on the market for $12,000. Now let me tell you, this isn't your average 70s land yacht, and here's why. First off, we're talking about a one-owner car here, folks. This LTD has been with Grandpa since it rolled off the showroom floor, and it shows. With only 75,000 miles on the clock, this baby has barely been broken in. The seller claims it's been garage kept since new, which explains why there's no rust, a common issue for cars of this vintage. Under the hood, you've got the mighty 351 Cleveland V8 engine. The seller says this car is extremely fast, which isn't something you hear every day about a 78 LTD. Paired with an automatic transmission, this setup should provide smooth cruising with plenty of power when you need it. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. The seller describes this LTD as being in all original collector's condition. That's a big deal for enthusiasts who value originality. They've kept up with all preventive maintenance, and it's just been fully serviced. There's even a new exhaust system and a rebuilt 4-barrel carburetor. The blue paint looks sharp in the photos, and the seller says everything works just like it should. That's impressive for a car that's over 40 years old. They're confident enough in its condition to say they'd drive it to Florida today. That's the kind of reliability you want in a classic car. At $12,000 or best offer, this 1978 LTD might seem a bit pricey compared to some other 70s Fords. But considering its one-owner history, low mileage, excellent condition, and all the recent work done, it could be a solid investment for the right buyer. Remember, folks, with classics like these, it's always a good idea to see them in person and maybe get a mechanic to look it over. But if everything checks out, this could be your ticket to owning a piece of Ford history that's been lovingly cared for its entire life. Whether you're looking for a show car, a weekend cruiser, or even a unique daily driver, this 78 LTD could fit the bill. 13. We're taking a look at a real oddball that's popped up on Craigslist. A 1981 Dodge Colt that's currently up for grabs at $2,500. Now, I've got to be straight with you folks, this one's a bit of a project, but it's got some interesting features that might make it worth a look for the right buyer. First off, let's talk about what makes this Colt special. It's got that rare twin-stick manual transmission, which is a cool piece of automotive history. The seller claims it has 90,500 original miles with documentation to prove it, which is pretty low for a car of this age. Now, here's where it gets a bit tricky. The seller describes the car as being in excellent shape, but there are some issues we need to address. Currently, it's not running due to an idle problem. It starts up, but won't keep idling unless you're on the gas. The seller's installed a new Mikuni carburetor and fuel pump, so that's a plus, but it still needs some work to get running properly. It's also got a flat tire and needs a full set of new tires, which the seller estimates at about $200. And here's a big one. It's got a salvage title. That's something you'll want to consider carefully if you're thinking about buying this car. On the bright side, it comes with a bunch of extra parts, an extra quarter window, hatchback, bonnet, rear bumper, and some interior trim. Plus, you get multiple manuals, which can be super helpful for a project car like this. At $2,500, this 1981 Dodge Colt could be a fun project for someone who's into quirky 80s hatchbacks and doesn't mind getting their hands dirty. It's definitely not a turnkey car. You'll need to tow it home and put some work into it. But if you're mechanically inclined and looking for a unique project, this could be an interesting opportunity. Remember, folks, with project cars like these, it's always a good idea to see them in person and maybe get a mechanic to look it over if possible. But if you're up for a challenge and have a soft spot for obscure 80s imports, this little Colt might just be your ticket to some vintage Mopar fun. Just be prepared for some work, and maybe bring a trailer when you go to check it out. 14. We're taking a look at a real piece of American automotive history, a 1962 Plymouth Valiant that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $9,000. Now, I've got to be honest with you folks, the seller's description is pretty sparse, but let's dive into what we do know about this classic compact. First off, we're dealing with a 62 Valiant here, which was part of the first generation of this model. These cars were Chrysler's answer to the growing compact car market, and they've got a unique style that really stands out from the crowd. Under the hood, you've got the legendary Slant 6 engine. These engines are known for their reliability and longevity, which is why you still see so many of them on the road today. The seller doesn't mention which version of the Slant 6 this car has, but whether it's the 170 or the 225, you're looking at a solid, dependable power plant. The seller states that the car is in great condition, which is always good to hear about a vehicle that's pushing 60 years old. However, they don't provide any details about the body, paint, or interior condition, so you definitely want to see this one in person to verify. One thing to note is that this Valiant comes with an automatic transmission. That's a plus for folks who prefer a more relaxed driving experience, though some purists might prefer a manual in a car of this vintage. Unfortunately, the seller doesn't provide any information about the mileage, which is something you'd want to ask about if you're serious about this car. At $9,000, this 1962 Valiant seems to be priced in the ballpark for a well-maintained example, but without more details, it's hard to say for sure. It could be a great find for someone looking to get into classic Mopar ownership, but you'll definitely want to see it in person and maybe get a mechanic to look it over. Remember, folks, the seller is only taking phone calls from serious buyers, so if you're interested, you'll need to pick up the phone. No emails on this one. 15. We're diving into a real gem that's popped up on Craigslist, a 1951 Chevrolet Custom that's currently on the market for $10,000. Now let me tell you, this isn't your average 51 Chevy, and here's why. First off, we're dealing with a deluxe sedan model here, folks. These cars have that unmistakable post-war style that just oozes classic Americana. The seller describes it as being in excellent condition, which is pretty impressive for a car that's over 70 years old. Now, here's where it gets interesting. This 51 Chevy isn't running its original inline-six. Instead, it's packing a Chevy 350 V8 small block under the hood. That's a popular swap that gives these old beauties a serious power boost. And get this, it's got a brand new Rochester Quadrajet 4-barrel carburetor. That's a nice upgrade that should help this engine breathe even better. The seller's done some recent work on this classic. We're talking new battery, new tires, and a freshly flushed radiator. They claim it starts right up and is road ready, which is music to any classic car lover's ears. The body is sporting a blue paint job, which is a classic color choice for these old Chevys. The seller doesn't mention the condition of the paint or interior, so you'd want to check those out in person. Now I've got to be straight with you. The odometer is broken. The listing shows 45,000 miles, but without a working odometer, it's hard to say how accurate that is. It's something to keep in mind and ask about if you're serious about this car. At $10,000, this 1951 Chevy Deluxe seems like it could be a solid deal for someone looking to get into classic car ownership. It's got that great 50s style with some modern power under the hood, and it sounds like it's ready to hit the road. Remember, folks, with classics like these, it's always a good idea to see them in person and maybe get a mechanic to look it over. But if everything checks out, this could be your ticket to some serious vintage cruising. 16. We're taking a look at a real diamond in the rough, a 1968 Buick GS that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $5,800. Now I've got to be straight with you folks, this isn't a turnkey classic, but it's got some serious potential for the right buyer. First off, we're dealing with a GS 400 here, which is a pretty desirable model in the Buick lineup. These cars were Buick's answer to the muscle car craze of the late 60s, and they've got a loyal following among collectors. Now, let's address the elephant in the room. This is a project car. The seller is upfront about the fact that it needs to be finished, so if you're looking for a car to drive home today, this isn't it. But if you're handy with a wrench and have a vision, this could be a great starting point. Here's where it gets interesting. The car is currently sporting a 455 cubic inch engine that's been rebuilt and reportedly has low miles. That's a serious power plant that could make this GS a real beast once it's all sorted out. It's paired with a slap shift transmission, which should make for some fun driving once it's roadworthy. One of the coolest features is the 4-wheel disc brake setup. That's a major upgrade over the original drum brakes these cars came with, and it'll make this GS stop as well as it goes. The seller mentions that there are lots of parts included, which is always good news for a project car. However, they don't go into detail about what those parts are or what's still needed to complete the car. The odometer shows 1,000 miles, but on a project car like this, that number doesn't tell us much. It's likely the mileage since the engine rebuild, but you'd want to clarify that with the seller. At $5,800, this 1968 Buick GS project could be a great opportunity for someone looking to get into classic muscle car restoration without breaking the bank on a finished car. It's got good bones with that rebuilt 455 and the disc brake upgrade, but make no mistake, you're looking at a project that will require time, effort, and additional investment to get road ready. 17. We're diving into a real piece of American automotive opulence, a 1977 Lincoln Mark V that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $9,000. Now let me tell you, this isn't your average land yacht, and here's why. First off, we're talking about a Mark V here, folks. These cars were the epitome of 70s luxury, with their long hoods, sharp lines, and that iconic Continental kit on the trunk. The seller claims this one has only 57,000 actual miles on the clock, which is impressively low for a car of this vintage. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The seller has done some recent work on this Lincoln. We're looking at a new battery, electronic modulator, and carburetor. They've also put on a new vinyl top, which is a big deal for these cars, as the vinyl tops can often be a trouble spot on older vehicles. The seller describes the condition as good, which is pretty promising for a car that's over 40 years old. However, they don't go into detail about the condition of the paint, interior, or any potential rust issues, so you definitely want to check those out in person. One thing to note is that the price has been reduced by $1,000, which could mean this is a pretty good deal for a Mark V in this condition. The seller is also open to trading for a Dodge Challenger in good condition, so if you've got one of those sitting around, this could be your chance to step into some serious 70s luxury. At $9,000, this 1977 Lincoln Mark V seems like it could be a solid buy for someone looking to get into classic luxury car ownership. It's got low miles, some recent maintenance, and that unmistakable 70s style. Remember folks, with classics like these, it's always a good idea to see them in person and maybe get a mechanic to look it over. But if everything checks out, this could be your ticket to cruising in style. Just keep in mind that the seller is hard of hearing, so you'll need to text rather than call if you're interested. 18. We're taking a look at a real blast from the past, a 1975 Ford Maverick that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $3,900. Now let me tell you, this isn't a perfect show car, but it's got some charm and potential that might just tickle your fancy. First off, we're dealing with a coupe model here, which is always a bit sportier than the four-door versions. The seller describes it as being in good overall condition, and it looks like it's had at least one repaint in its original white color. That's not a bad thing. It means someone cared enough to keep it looking fresh. Under the hood, you've got the trusty 200 cubic inch inline-6 engine paired with a C4 automatic transmission. This isn't a tire-shredding muscle car setup, but it's known for being reliable and easy to maintain. The seller mentions it runs and drives well but could use a tune-up. That's pretty typical for a car of this age. Now here's where it gets interesting. This Maverick has some upgrades that set it apart. We're talking power disc brakes, a 5-lug wheel setup, and 15 centerline style wheels. It's also got a grabber style grille, which gives it a sportier look. Inside, you'll find a complete interior with a rare rear window defrost fan. A neat little feature that shows this car's got some unique options. But let's be real here, folks. This Maverick isn't without its issues. The seller is upfront about some rust in the trunk area, minor rust on the driver's floor, and in the cowl. They've also had the carpet pulled back to assist with drying, which suggests there might have been some moisture issues. At $3,900, this 1975 Maverick could be a fun project for someone looking to get into classic car ownership without breaking the bank. It's got good bones, some nice upgrades, and it's drivable as is. Plus, with that inline-6, you're looking at a car that should be pretty economical to run. Remember folks, with classics like these, it's always a good idea to see them in person and maybe get a mechanic to look it over. But if you're handy with a wrench and don't mind tackling some rust repair, this could be your ticket to some affordable classic Ford fun. 19. We're diving into a real gem that's popped up on Craigslist, a 1962 Oldsmobile Cutlass that's currently on the market for $11,000. Now let me tell you, this isn't your average classic, and here's why. First off, we're talking about an F85 Cutlass here, folks. These cars are pretty rare, especially in the deluxe trim like this one. It's a piece of automotive history that you don't see every day, that's for sure. Under the hood, you've got the all-aluminum 215 cubic inch V8 engine. This was a pretty innovative power plant for its time, and it's been completely rebuilt about 10,000 miles ago. The sellers even upgraded it with an Edelbrock carburetor, which should help it breathe a bit better. They say it drives great, which is always good to hear about a 61-year-old car. Now let's talk about condition. The sellers being upfront that it's not perfect. After all, it is over 6 decades old, but they describe it as being in great shape for its age. The interior is reportedly very clean and original, which is a big plus for collectors. It's even got the upgraded center console with split bench seats, a nice touch that adds to its rarity. The exterior's got that classic 60s Oldsmobile style, painted in blue. It was repainted at some point in its life, but in the original color. There are some issues with the clear coat fading and flaking in spots, so it's not a show-quality paint job. But the good news is that it's reportedly rust-free, which is a big deal for a car of this vintage. The odometer shows 8,256 miles, but as the seller notes, it's likely rolled over at least once. That's pretty common for cars of this age. At $11,000, this 1962 Oldsmobile F85 Cutlass Deluxe seems like it could be a solid deal for the right buyer. It's not perfect, but it's a rare piece of automotive history that's been well maintained and is ready to drive. Remember, folks, with classics like these, it's always a good idea to see them in person and maybe get a mechanic to look it over. But if you're looking for a unique classic that'll turn heads at car shows and cruise nights, this 62 Cutlass might just be your ticket. Just be prepared for lots of questions from curious onlookers. Cars this rare tend to draw a crowd. 20. We're diving into a real head-turner that's popped up on Craigslist, a 1984 Buick Regal that's currently on the market for $15,000. Now let me tell you, this isn't your grandpa's Buick, and here's why. First off, we're dealing with a heavily modified Regal here, folks. This car has been transformed from a typical 80s cruiser into a serious street machine. Let's start with what's under the hood. We're talking about a 355 cubic inch V8 engine. That's a serious upgrade from the stock engine, and it's paired with a 400 transmission to handle all that power. The sellers added headers and a Flowmaster exhaust system, which means this Buick probably sounds as mean as it looks. And speaking of looks, it's sporting a fresh coat of red paint that's sure to turn heads. Now here's where it gets really interesting. This Regal is rolling on 24-inch gold Ashanti wheels. That's a bold choice that definitely makes a statement. To accommodate those massive wheels, the rear end has been shortened and mini-tubbed. They've also upgraded to rear disc brakes, which is a smart move with all that power on tap. One unique feature is the G6 sunroof. That's not something you see every day on a Regal of this vintage, and it adds a nice touch to the overall package. The odometer shows 96,000 miles, but with all these modifications, the mileage is probably less relevant than the condition of the upgrades. At $15,000, this 1984 Buick Regal is priced at a premium compared to stock examples. But you're not just buying a car here. You're buying someone's vision and a lot of custom work. It's definitely not for everyone, but for the right buyer who appreciates this style of modification, it could be a unique find. Remember, folks, with heavily modified cars like these, it's crucial to see them in person and maybe get a performance car specialist to look it over. You'll want to make sure all those upgrades are working together harmoniously. So, if you're in the market for a Buick Regal that's anything but ordinary, and you're not afraid of a car that'll get a lot of attention, both positive and negative, this '84 Regal might just be your ticket to standing out from the crowd. Just be prepared for some interesting conversations at every stoplight.